everyone. Today, as we celebrate the Women's Equality Day, I wish to discuss the status of women in ancient India. This is important because the position of women in any society is, one can say, a true indicator of its cultural and spiritual standing. India has been independent politically for 74 years, but when it comes to the social, political, economic, and even spiritual position of women, we have not so much to feel good about. The purpose of today's lecture is not to fix charges or to ascertain where the fault lies, but to make you all aware of our glorious past, which gives us that image of woman, which is a matter of pride for all of us. I need to make one thing clear. When I say past, I refer to the ancient times, Vedic or Upanishadic, as well as the times to which our epics belong. Much can be gathered from a thorough study of our ancient texts as they exhaustively discuss the way people led their secular as well as spiritual life. And I will try my best to present an authentic and fascinating picture of the women who lived in India in those times and achieved glory in the various realms of life, whether it was political, social, moral, or spiritual. Manu, who is regarded as the highest authority on matters related to principles and practices of the Orthodox Hinduism, unequivocally assigns to women the status of presiding deities in the home. According to him, there is no difference whatsoever between wives who are destined to bear children, who secure many blessings, who are worthy of worship and irradiate their dwellings, and the goddesses of fortune who reside in the houses of men. He says that where the female relations live in grief, the family soon wholly perishes. The family where they are not unhappy ever prospers. The 56th verse from chapter 3 of the Manusmriti says, Yatra naryastu pujyante ramante tatra devata yatraitastu na pujyante sarva tatra phala kriya. Meaning, where women are honored, there the gods rejoice. Where, on the other hand, they are not honored, there all rites are fruitless. In those times, women enjoyed both their freedom and their role, as wives were considered to be ardhangini or the better half and sahadharmini or the equal partner. There is also this whole philosophical significance attached to the concept of God as Ardhanarishwara, that is, half man and half woman. As Radha Krishnan puts it, the image of Ardhanarishwara signifies the mutual relationship of man and woman, the idea of cooperative, interdependent, separately incomplete, but mutually complete masculine and feminine functions. This is the vision and ideal towards which both men and women strive. Philosophically speaking, there is an essential divinity and a fundamental unity in the diversity of nature. And this is what is declared by the Vedic seers. Beneath the ephemeral and the physical forms is the same reality, that is Brahman. Men and women differ only insofar as their physical and the mental constitution or framework is concerned. They are just identical in consciousness. And this is so evident in the Vedic mantras like Sarvam Khalavidam Brahma, meaning, verily, all this is Brahman. Idam Amritam Idam Brahmedam Sarvam, which means this is immortality, this is Brahman, this is all. Tat Tvamasi, or thou art that, and Aham Brahmasmi, meaning I am Brahman. So, there is no discrimination between men and women in the Vedic tradition, all being equally Brahman. And it is a general misconception that the ideals of women are opposed to those of men. There is no denial, of course, that women as mothers and nurturers of life on earth have some specific duties to perform, follow a specific path in that direction, and have some specific ideals to seek. But these in no way lessen their dignity and position in the society. Actually, inequality is of two types, natural and conventional. Natural inequality pertains to the natural laws, and therefore nothing can be done about it. Conventional inequality is based on the customs and traditions and a lot of other factors, and they have to do with individual decisions and choices, and therefore can be changed. Men and women are functionally different. That does not make one superior and the other inferior. They are naturally disposed to perform their respective duties, and that does not make them unequal. The Rig Veda states, the wife and husband, being the equal halves of one substance, are equal in every respect. Therefore, both should join and take equal parts in all work, religious and secular. Accordingly, equal opportunities were afforded to men and women, boys and girls, for education and work, for intellectual development and spiritual development as well. Young girls undertook sacred initiations called Upanayana at the age of about 8 to begin the study of the Vedas. Apart from studies, they engaged themselves in activities like milking the cow, weaving, even bringing the soma plant and extracting the juice out of it. And this reminds me of a hymn from the Rig Veda which describes how a young girl plucked a soma twig and offered it as a sacrifice to Indra. So conventionally, men and women in those times were considered equal. Actually, there are two classes of educated women, Sadyovadhus and Brahmavadinis. Sadyovadhus were the ones who pursued their studies till their marriage, while the Brahmavadinis pursued their studies throughout their life with or without getting married. Just notice the etymological meaning of the expression Brahmavadini. It means someone discoursing on sacred texts. It also means a defender or expounder of the Veda, or one who asserts that all things are to be identified with Brahman. Sadyovadhus were the domestic kinds who dedicated their lives to the welfare of their families. Brahmavadinis, on the other hand, strived for the knowledge of truth, the knowledge of Brahman. So, for them, the goal of their life was to attain spiritual well-being. It was not mandatory for the Brahmavadinis to remain celibate, renounce the world, and live a secluded life in a forest. In fact, many Brahmavadinis who attained Brahmagnana were actually married. Likewise, many Sadyavadhus, while carrying out their domestic duties, aspired for spiritual knowledge and were finally blessed with it. Whether a woman was married or not was not the criteria for achieving spiritual knowledge. The only thing that counted was their inner inclinations and their deep-rooted goals. The unmarried women teachers were called upadhyayas, and the married women teachers were called upadhyayanis. So you can imagine how high the standard of learning was for the women in ancient India. The Rig Veda corroborates this fact, as many hymns, many mantras in the Rig Veda are contributed by as many as 27 Brahmavadinis. Sage Shaunaka has even mentioned the names of these 27 Brahmavadinis in his work called Brihad Devta, which is actually a catalogue of the deities worshipped in the various hymns of the Rig Veda. It also contains stories related to the composition of these hymns. So you see, the Rig Veda Samhita mentions several women scholars like Ghosha, Godha, Vishwavara, Apala, Romasha, Lopamudra, Vak, Surya, who are authors of the Vedic mantras. Some of the hymns that are attributed to these Brahmavadinis are simple and honest expressions of their deep emotions, their desire for a worthy, loving husband, and of a happy domestic life. Two hymns, 39th and 40th, of the 10th book of the Rig Veda are attributed to Ghosha. Each of these hymns contains 14 verses. The first hymn praises the Ashwins, the twin gods associated with medicine, health, dawn, and sciences. The second hymn is a personal womanly wish expressing her desire for a prosperous married life. Actually, the legend has it that Ghosha, from her young age, suffered from an incurable ailment which disfigured her body. So she was unmarried and stayed at her father's house. Now, the hymns that are attributed to her are actually her implorations with the Ashwins, who ultimately got pleased and cured her disease and restored her youthfulness. And finally, she got married and experienced a happy domestic life. Likewise, Brahmavadini Vishwavara, her hymn is dedicated to Agni, or the fire god. Apala's hymn is dedicated to Indra. Lopamudra is credited to have composed hymn number 179 of the Rig Veda. Now, the verses of Lopamudra's hymn are dedicated to goddess Rati, which elaborate on the relationship between a husband and a wife. But if you wish to know about the highest ideals, then the hymns attributed to Vak and Surya are quite significant. Is it not surprising to know that many women in the Vedic times attained great heights not only as Vedic scholars but also as great philosophers, debaters, and teachers. There are instances where women philosophers have defeated great sages in spiritual debates. One very famous instance is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where a debate takes place between sage Yagnavalkya and Gargi in the court of King Janaka, and in the presence of thousands of the Vedic seers, all expert in spiritual matters. If you read the Upanishad, you will find how Gargi challenges Yagnavalkya on his knowledge of Brahman. So women were free. Society did not impose any restrictions on them. So much so, the widows did not have to adhere to, uncompromising fidelity towards their dead husbands. They were allowed to remarry. The institution of marriage was held in great esteem during that time. But women, if they chose to remain unmarried, they were free to do so. There was no obligation, religious or otherwise, on them to get married. And there are references in the Vedic literature where old maids live in their father's house till their death. Girls also had freedom to choose their husbands. There are references in the text of certain festive gatherings like the samanas, where young men and women would get opportunities to mingle and choose their prospective partners. Also, during this time there were no such evil practices like sati or widow living a secluded life or even child marriage. A gradual transition in the status of women happened during the period of the epics. There are certain episodes in the text where some extreme views about women are given, and on reading those passages one could wonder, why would anyone say that women were the respected lot? So you would witness contradictory views about women in the Smritis and the epics. We read in the Mahabharata about women being treated badly, and here I am particularly referring to the most prominent woman in the ancient Indian literature, Draupadi. But we also cannot deny the fact that in the same text, Vedavyasa extolled the virtues of Draupadi. Basically, during this time also, after the end of the Vedic age and during the epic period, women were honored, had a respectful place in the society, and enjoyed considerable amount of freedom. Education was emphasized. But what really determined the position of woman during the epic period was the institution of marriage, because an ideal woman is she who is an ideal wife. Wife is the cause of a man's happiness in this life and the next. She is his best friend. Virtues like chastity and fidelity are glorified in the epic period. The epics emphasize that the life of an ideal wife is strewn with difficulties and pain. But if she strives hard, she can ensure happiness for herself in the next life. It will be interesting to read about some eminent women from this period to get an idea about the position and status of women in this period. So that is a task for you. Moving forward to the period of Smritis or the Dharma Shastras. The position of women further deteriorated as the Vedic ideals of equality and oneness began to diminish with the passage of time, and some drastic changes took place. Marriage not only became obligatory but was also done at a very early age, and this affected the education of girls. Girls could only finish elementary education and they were married off. So they were denied higher education, and because of this lack of knowledge, particularly Vedic knowledge, they became unfit to perform Vedic sacrifices and various other samskaras, and finally became unfit to even recite the Vedic mantras. An unquestionable devotion to her husband and a complete dedication towards her domestic life was her only duty. Anyway, you must have noticed by now that the institution of marriage was fully developed since the time of the Rig Veda. And I think it will be worthwhile to discuss the 8 different forms of marriage that find reference in the Griha Sutras, which are the various recensions of the Vedas and the Manusmriti. I will briefly tell you about these 8 kinds of marriages. The first is called Brahma. Here, the father invites a man learned in the Vedas to marry his daughter. The second kind of marriage is Daiva, where the girl is married to a priest who conducts a sacrifice during the course of the performance of the sacrifice. So, as far as Brahma marriage is concerned, it is more of a social and cultural enrichment of the two parties involved. Whereas offering a daughter to the officiating priest at a sacrifice in the Daiva marriage is, one can say, more karmic and dharmic in nature. Because, giving a daughter as a gift in a sacrifice is probably the greatest sacrifice parents could make to please gods. Now, the third kind of marriage is called Arsha. And in this kind of marriage, the bridegroom offers a cow and a bull or 2 pairs of cows to the father of the girl. The fourth kind of marriage is Prajapatya. Here, the father of the bride, while giving her hand to the man, addresses the couple saying, "May both of you perform together your secular and religious duties." Arsha, as the name suggests, is the kind of marriage which happened mainly in the priestly families and indicates the pastoral state of the society when cattle were considered a precious gift. And the name of the fourth kind of marriage, Prajapatya, indicates that the couple has entered the solemn bond for the repayment of debts or rinas to Prajapati. Now, the fifth kind of marriage is called Asura. Here, the man willingly gives as much wealth as he can afford to the bride and her family. Then is Gandharva, which is a voluntary union of the girl and her lover. Now, regarding the Asura form of marriage, we can say that it is like an agreement between 2 families where a commercial transaction is happening. And Gandharva marriage, on the other hand, is based on mutual consent and springs from desire. Then comes Rakshasa, where the bride is forcibly carried from her home. And last, Paishacha, where a man by stealth seduces a girl who is asleep or intoxicated or disordered in intellect. The last 2 kinds of marriages are condemned by the Dharma Shastras, as in both these kinds, women are being victims of a crime. In the Rakshasa marriage, the woman has no recourse to family as it has already been slain. Paishacha marriage is actually nothing more than exploitation of a vulnerable woman. So, this much about the 8 kinds of marriages. Now, despite giving an exalted description of women and the honor and respect she deserves, Manu makes it very clear that women need protection. And he says, a woman is protected by her father during her childhood, by her husband during youth, and by her sons during old age. She is never fit for freedom. There is also a passage in the Aitareya Brahmana which says the son is the hope of the family. The daughter, on the other hand, is a source of trouble to it. Of course, this decline did not happen all at once or in every stratum of the society, because there were people who made special arrangements for the education of their daughters. They were taught music, dance, painting, and other fine arts. However, marriage used to be the ultimate goal and the turning point in a girl's life. Before I forget, the position of widows also became worse, and the practice of sati somehow gained prominence. Coming down to the Middle Ages, when the foreign invasions took place, during this time the position of women went to its all-time low. Anyway, the Vedic women, who were free, courageous, and knowledgeable individuals, were reduced into servile, passive, and weak beings in the later periods. And today, the women in India find themselves stuck at the crossroads. They are somewhere between the glorious spiritual past and the attractive materialistic present. With these details, I will now end this lecture. Thank you so much.